And then after that, Brother Bashir, who used to be former Catholic, will tell his story, and then we will have a question answer session. And after that Isha Salah, we will have Islamic Jeopardy by Sheikh Usman. So, Brother Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So first and foremost, I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Afterwards, I'd like to say Jazakallah khair to the brothers who helped to organize this event. Really, this event of sharing our experiences with the brother Bashir and myself really is a means to encourage the Muslim community. And that inshallah ta'ala, by means of sharing our experiences and how we came to Islam and our journey to Islam, that could be a means of increasing each other's iman, and also a means of realizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in actuality is the one who guides the people to the religion, and it's not ourselves. And so when we try to share this message of Islam with others, we need to keep that in mind. It is only our responsibility to tell the people what the message of Islam is, but ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who guides the people. And so, inshallah ta'ala, this will be a means of encouragement to all of you. For a certainty, when it comes to people who have accepted the religion of Islam, there are many different journeys that people have, different reasons why people come to accept the religion. And inshallah, this is going to be my journey and how I came to become a Muslim and to accept the religion of Islam as the religion of truth. To begin with, I was not raised in a very religious household. But you can say that for the most part, we had Christian beliefs in our family. We were not a family who regularly went to church or studied the Bible in itself, but when there were discussions of religion or discussions of God, generally it was always in a Christian understanding. That we believed in God, we believed that God had a Son, Jesus Christ, who died for the sins of the world in order for salvation. But again, we're not a very religious family, so my parents didn't take us to any churches, we didn't go to any Sunday schools or anything like that. However, at the age of 15, for myself, something changed for me. And that was that within me as an individual, I, for some reason, began to develop a desire within myself. And that was a desire to know who is God, who is the Creator. And even at that age, a lot of times I would just think about life in general, and the fact that we're here, we exist. And despite the fact that we might experience hardships and difficulties in our lives, even then, the life that is given to us in this world is a gift. It's something that was given to us, and we didn't pay any price for it. And so it was a feeling that I had that obviously if this was given to me by a Creator, I had a desire to know exactly who that Creator was, because I wanted to be able to show gratitude. I wanted to know who is this God, who is this Creator, and what is it exactly He would want for me as an individual, so that I can show Him that I appreciate and that I'm grateful for the life that I have. So as I mentioned, my family, since we, for the most part, held Christian beliefs, naturally I began to turn to the Bible to try to look for the answers to the questions that I had. But anybody that knows, if ever you've seen a Bible, you know that it's a big book. Very small, thin pages, but a big book, thousands of pages. It's composed of some, many tens of different books inside of one book. And so for me as an individual who, again, was not raised going to church and things like that, I really didn't know exactly where to start, even to find the questions to the answers that I had within the Bible. It just happened that around that time, my grandmother had talked to me and mentioned to me how she was going to begin to study the Bible with one of my aunts who was a Jehovah's Witness. She belonged to the Jehovah's Witness community. And probably you have seen them, or they probably at some point or another have come knocking at your doors and trying to give to you publications and pamphlets and things like that. Anyway, she belonged to this group, and so I told my grandmother, that I'd like to sit in on that study so that at least I can hear what they have to say, and if I have questions, I can ask and try to have some of those questions answered by means of the Bible, since this was the book that they used as they claimed to be Christians. As I sat through the study, eventually my aunt decided that it would be better to have another individual to come to study with me, that I would progress more in that way. So one of the local elders who was in a congregation here in San Diego, he began to study with me on a regular basis. And I can say to you that initially, I was very impressed with their way of studying with people. It seemed like for every answer, or for every question that I had, they always seemed to have an answer. And they always seemed to use the Bible in order to back up the answers that they were giving to me. At the same time, a lot of the publications that they have, like their books and their magazines, were always filled with biblical references to try to support the things that they were saying. And I felt as an individual that, if we're going to be studying the Word of God, this was something that was attractive to me because this seemed to be like a group of people who really stuck to the Bible in everything that they believed and with everything that they practiced. So as an individual, as a teenager who was very enthusiastic, at the age of 16, I finally decided to dedicate myself to, as I believe, to worship God as a Jehovah's Witness in association with the Watchtower Bible Tract Society organization. And that was at the age of 16. Now, if you don't really know much about Jehovah's Witnesses and what they believe, basically Jehovah's Witnesses are, of course, well known for their preaching work that they do, walking in the streets, going door to door. But some of the beliefs that make them different from other Christian groups, and they do claim to be a Christian group, but what makes them different is that they are a group that does not believe in the Trinity. In other words, they claim to be Unitarian Christians. That is, that they believe in God, but they do not believe that God exists as a Trinity. Jesus, according to their view, is only, as they would say, a son of God, but not God himself. To them, God, or as they call by the name Jehovah, is essentially eternal, almighty, has no beginning, no end, and he's the only creator of all things that exist. However, they do believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Peace and blessing be upon him. They also believe that Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion are the restoration of pure worship in the last days, which they believe we are living in right now. They believe that in the year 1914, Jesus Christ began to rule as a king of the kingdom of God, which they believe will eventually, sometime very close in the future, take complete control over the entire earth, basically removing all governments and rulerships and systems in order to create a paradise here on the earth, under which Jehovah's Witnesses and other righteous persons of the past will be resurrected to live in. And one of the things that is very, very core to their belief, which many witnesses may not admit to you, but is very, very important in their belief, is that they believe that the Watchtower organization, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, is basically the community, or we could say the channel of communication that God is using to communicate with true Christians on the earth today. Since they believe their organization is the restoration of pure worship, if you want salvation, you have to be associated with the Watchtower organization in order to receive, as they would say, the spiritual food that is coming from Jehovah directly by means of this organization. And so for a witness belonging to the Watchtower organization or the Jehovah's Witness community is basically essential to salvation. And as a witness, this was something that I believed. As a young person, of course, believing that this was the truth, I dedicated myself as best I could, since I had very little responsibilities, and we were encouraged as young people to use our energy and our youth. And so about 6 months after I became baptized as a witness, I began a regular full-time ministry where I dedicated about 70 hours a month of field, what we call field service. I was going and talking to people on the streets and door to door. By the age of 19, I was appointed to serve as a ministerial servant in one of the local congregations, which is also known as a position of deacon in other churches. And by the age of 21, progressing in my understanding of the Jehovah's Witness religion, I was eventually assigned and invited to speak as a Sunday guest speaker to give sermons to various congregations throughout San Diego. At the age of 25, the local body of elders to the congregation to which I belong had even started to discuss with me the possibility of becoming appointed as an elder myself in the congregation to be a counselor and a teacher, because they felt that I had the ability to do that. However, at this particular point now, at the age of 25, a lot of things began to change for me in terms of my views for the Watchtower religion and organization as a whole. When I was 25, they gave me the responsibility to serve as what they called a book study conductor or overseer. And as a responsibility of book study conductor, basically I was given the responsibility to care for about 20 to 25 members of our particular congregation for a weekly book study that we would have in an assigned location with that particular group of people. And so it was my responsibility as the conductor to make sure that when we were studying the books that were given by the Watchtower organization, each programmed weekly study, it was my responsibility to make sure that all of the individual members were understanding the information in these books, which were essentially instructions by the organization, and make sure that they understood them appropriately and according to the way that the organization wanted the individual members to understand it, which was a weighty responsibility because I had to study, I had to make sure that I understood it well in order to help the rest of the members understand it also. During that period of time, as a book study conductor, there was one particular week of one of the studies where we were studying a verse-by-verse explanation of one of the pieces of a book of the Bible, which is called the Book of Revelation. And in this particular part of the Book of Revelation in the Bible, it was describing a vision that was being seen from, of course, according to them, one of their prophets of the Bible. We're not going to get into debate as to whether he was or he wasn't, but in this vision, it talks about blasts of a trumpet. Okay, the trumpets were blown, and after every trumpet was blown, some catastrophic event would happen upon the earth. And so the organization was now giving their interpretation as to how those prophecies were fulfilled. In one of the part of the study, they began to make the assertion that the second blast of the trumpet that was mentioned in the Bible, in this book of Revelation, was actually fulfilled in the year 1922. They said that it was fulfilled at a convention that Jehovah's Witnesses had at that time that was given in a lecture which was entitled, "Millions Now Living Will Never Die." And they also mentioned that around that particular period of time, all Jehovah's Witnesses at that time, in the 1920s, were engaged in a preaching campaign that was called "Millions Now Living Will Never Die." So they were going to people, they were giving this booklet, and they were telling the people how the end was in sight, so close that millions who were now living at that time would never have to die because the end of the system would come and they would be able to pass on into the new world of Christ's rulership. Now, once we finished that study and we went home, a lot of that started to really set very bad with me. I had very bad feelings about it. Because even when I was just thinking about the title itself, "Millions Now Living Will Never Die," given in the early 1920s, it was obvious to me that obviously millions who were living at that time were dead or were basically on their way of dying. This was some 90 or more years ago. And so this didn't sit very well with me. And I also knew the fact that the organization had admitted, even in their recent publications, that that preaching campaign that those witnesses took part in the 1920s was based upon the assumption that they believed that the end of the world was coming in 1925. So that's why in 1922 and in all of those years they were telling people that the end was coming, millions now living will never have to die, because they believed that the end of the world was coming in 1925. Of course that never happened. But it bothered me because I asked myself, why is it that they're attaching such importance to this event, to this lecture, to this campaign that they did, when clearly it was based upon completely erroneous assumptions and man-made reasoning of the leaders of the organization at that time. If it was completely based upon falsehood, how is it that a biblical prophecy was fulfilled in that, when that was something that was completely wrong and an error? And I also thought to myself that it would be a great dishonor for me to believe and to think that the Creator, who is perfect, would have any involvement in directing, quote-unquote, His organization to carry out something that was based upon falsehood, and now, even in this time, have the organization say that, yes, that was a fulfillment of Bible prophecy and so forth, when in actuality the entire thing was based upon falsehood. I couldn't attribute falsehood to the perfectness or the perfection of the Creator. And so this was the first time as a Jehovah's Witness. At this point, it had been 9 years, some nine and a half years as a witness. It was the first time that I actually admitted to myself that I did not believe what the organization was teaching in terms of this particular teaching. And you have to understand that this was something that was very scary to me as a Jehovah's Witness. Because witnesses view the organization as God's channel of communication. And essentially, if you question the organization's teaching, it's like questioning the teaching or the instruction of God Himself, because this is the channel that God is supposed to use to communicate to true Christians on earth. And it was scary because essentially witnesses, as they view it, if you question and you go against the organization, you are going against and rebelling against God. Because God, they say, is the one directing our organization. But yet I had to admit that this particular teaching was not true, it was incorrect, and I did not believe it. So as some months went on, these little type of doubts began to grow and grow even more, because I started to think, if this is wrong, and I can admit that this is something that's wrong. Of course, at that point I wouldn't say anything. I would admit that to anybody for fear of being the consequences of it. But I thought, well, what other things are wrong here? And so, as months went by, eventually I got to a point where I wanted to just study everything from the beginning, from the scratch. So I started to look at all of the different views in Christianity. And again, I did that without letting anybody within the Jehovah's Witness community know about what I was doing. But I began to read books and publications from former Jehovah's Witnesses. I began to read the counter-arguments against the beliefs of the Watchtower organization. And after this period of time, over about a year of time, I actually fully admitted to myself that I did not believe absolutely that this indeed was God's organization at all. I didn't believe that God was using this organization. I didn't believe that even I should be a Jehovah's Witness any longer. But I was afraid, because if I take that step, I knew that eventually my family that were witnesses would never speak to me again. All of the people I'd grown to have close friendships with would never speak to me again. And I was also afraid of the kind of tension that this would put between my spouse and myself. She was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. Of course, I was not. But how would she react to that situation? So I kept it quiet. Around this time now, because you're probably wondering, how did I come into contact with Islam? How did I begin to learn about it? I began to take a course at a community college on world religion. And this was basically just to fulfill a general education requirement. I had no interest in learning about the religions to try to join one. I just was taking it purely as educational purpose. And one of the projects that were given to us was that we had to visit 2 different sites or places of worship. And the list that was given to us was very specific, and that the instructor, our professor, did not want us to visit any churches or anything related to the Christian religion. Because he said, you guys are in America, you know a lot about Christianity, but he wanted us to visit other different types of religions to get a different experience. And then we had to visit those sites and write a report on it. So I'm thinking, okay, I have 2 options, because I can only visit 2 places. So I'm looking at the list, and because I considered myself a monotheist, I didn't want to visit anywhere that I considered to be polytheist. So I didn't want to visit a Hindu temple, and I didn't want to visit Buddhist places of worship. So really there were only three options, and that was a Jewish synagogue, a Sikh place of worship, because I had heard that they claimed to believe in one God, so the Sikh religion, or I could visit a masjid, a mosque. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to visit a mosque. I'm not going to go over there, with those people. So I decided I'm going to visit a synagogue, and I'll try to find out how I can visit this Sikh place of worship. So I went to the synagogue, I visited, I did my report. I tried to get in contact with the Sikh religion and their place of worship here in San Diego, up in Poway, but for weeks I was never getting any response. So now I had a problem because my project report was due, but I was missing one of my assignments that I needed to go to. So now I was stuck. I had to go to a local mosque and to do my report there. I had no other option. So I got myself ready. I found out, Masjid Abu Bakr was what we had on our list. So I drove out there and I went to observe, which I now know was Salatul Isha. And I can tell you, when I pulled up, I was nervous about going inside. I didn't know how the people would react to me. I thought maybe they would think I was spying on them, or maybe they would get offended because I'm not observing the prayer, because I only wanted to watch, I didn't want to participate, and I thought maybe they're going to be offended at that. But I went inside. And immediately I came into contact with some of the brothers who were there, and they greeted me very friendly. And they assured me that it would be no problem. I could sit in the back, I could take notes, I could observe, and that was completely fine. So then it came time for the salah. And we heard, of course, the iqamah. Everybody began to form the lines for the salah. And I can tell you that after it was finished, it was something that had a very profound effect on me. Because I knew that much of what I was seeing was not something that was strange. Many people, they might see the salah who are not familiar with it and think that it's something strange. But to me, as a person who read the Bible and who studied it, I knew this wasn't something strange. I knew that in the Bible, it mentions very clearly how prophets and righteous persons in the Bible also used to bow and also used to prostrate and touch the forehead to their ground when they would pray to God in the Old Testament of the Bible, and even in the New Testament. I knew, as is mentioned in the Bible, that when people used to supplicate, they would oftentimes point their palms toward the sky when they would make supplication, similar to the etiquette of dua when we raise our hands. This wasn't something strange. When Muslims faced the Kaaba in the direction of Mecca, I knew this wasn't something strange, because even in the Bible, it mentions that some individuals used to make it a custom 3 times a day to face the city of Jerusalem when they used to pray, a place of worship to Almighty God. And so this wasn't something strange to me, that Muslims would be doing this. I knew that it had roots somewhere in the Bible. So after I left, I was given some CDs, some pamphlets, some tracts. And on my way home, I put the CD in, I started to listen to it, and I found myself agreeing a lot with what I was hearing. When I got home, I started to read through the pamphlets that were given to me. And in particular, one was about the Islamic view of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus Christ. And as I read it, I began to be shocked at the fact that Muslims believed in the virgin birth of Jesus, peace be upon him. They believed in calling him Al-Masih, or the Messiah. They believed in his ascension. They believed that he would have a second coming in order to establish truth and justice in the earth. And these were things that I was completely unaware of in terms of Islamic belief, things that I believed. So that night, that very same night, I was curious to find out, are there other Christians who have not yet accepted this religion? And I started to watch some videos on YouTube, actually. I pulled some up, Christians convert to Islam, what were their reasons. And I'll say, subhanAllah, that in the middle of one of those experiences that I was watching, a kind of scary feeling came over me, because it was probably the first time that I thought to myself, is it possible that I might become a Muslim? Because this was something that was completely out of my mind. Never, ever thought about considering Islam. And now here I was being faced with things that I was agreeing with so much about the religion that it became a thought in my mind, and it scared me not because of the religion itself, but because I knew the consequences that would come about when I would have to leave the organization that I was with in order to accept the religion. It was going to mean big changes for myself. And that was kind of scary for me. But I still had some unanswered questions. Because as a person who had Christian belief, I still wanted to know about salvation. If Muslims don't believe that Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, died for the sins of humanity for salvation, then what is it that Muslims believe about it? How are we saved? So I decided, you know what, I want to talk to some people more. So I decided to find a local masjid that was closer to where I lived, and it happened to be here at Masjid Rabat. So one day when my wife was at work, I didn't want to let her know about what I was doing. I got in my car. She was at work. I had the day off, so I got in my car and I came here to the masjid in the middle of the day. And subhanAllah, I remember parking right here in the front of the masjid, but not really having the courage to come inside. Eventually, I left. I pulled away, and I actually circled the block about 5 different times. Trying to build up the courage to come inside because I wanted to speak to somebody, but I just couldn't build up the courage to come inside and do it. So I actually drove away. I was driving down Oklahoma Boulevard to get back onto the freeway. But, it was nagging me because I knew I wanted to speak to somebody, and now I wasn't doing it. So I turned my car back around, I pulled into the back of the parking lot back here, and I made myself come inside. And the person that I began to speak to when I came inside was one of the local brothers here, Monir al-Habashi. We talked for about an hour of time here, right in here in this office. And he told me, why don't you come back this Friday? We have every Friday we have a sermon, and there'll be some brothers here that you can speak to about these questions who are very knowledgeable in this area. So when I came that next Friday, I came, I listened to the khutbah, I even prayed with Allah. It didn't bother me. I didn't know what I was doing, of course, but it didn't bother me because I knew the Muslims were people who worship one God, basically the same God as the Christians, but different concept. So it didn't bother me. And then I was introduced to 2 brothers, Sheikh Salim Morgan and Dr. Muhammad Tarabishi. And as I spent time with these individuals, they began to answer many of the questions that I had. They began to give me different references of lectures that I could listen to. And subhanAllah, I can say that I listened to probably about 20 to 30 hours of lectures about early Christianity and about comparative religion in terms of Islam versus Christianity. And the question that I had about salvation came to be answered. Did Muslims believe that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient to cover over the sins of an individual, and that the blood or sacrifice of someone or something is not necessary? And in fact, this was not only the belief of Muslims, but in fact the belief of the Jews as well. So if anybody was not in agreement with this viewpoint regarding the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and salvation, it was the Christians who were taking it to a completely different level. The more I began to think about the idea of the sacrifice, the more unjust and irrational it became. Because how is it that guilt of other people can pass to innocent people as if they believe with Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him? The sacrifice was absolutely forbidden. It was something detestable to God in the Bible. But yet Christians believe that a human sacrifice is now being used to save humanity. Also, if human beings were considered sinful because of the sin of Adam, alayhi salam, then they should be even more sinful now for killing the innocent Son of God, if that is really what they believe. And so eventually I left that belief and I came to accept and adopt the Islamic viewpoint. For some time I began to continue my time coming to the masjid for about 2 months, and I would talk to the brothers, and every time they would ask me, are you ready to accept Islam? And every week I would tell those brothers, give me some time. When I'm ready, when I feel that my heart is ready, I'll let you know. So one of the brothers invited me one Saturday. He was going to be giving a lecture to some students from a local school at the time about Islam. He invited me. And I remember us sitting in the back of the musalla here, right in the back, and discussing different topics. And I remember telling him, 6 months prior to that time, there's no way I could imagine myself that I would be sitting amongst the Muslims, talking about Islam and even thinking about possibly accepting the religion. And that's when he asked me again, are you ready to accept the religion? And feeling that my heart was ready, I took the decision and I declared my faith in this religion, and I accepted the religion by taking Shahada. SubhanAllah. And SubhanAllah, I can say that since that time, there is absolutely no regret, and I don't mind the fact that I had to face consequences for leaving my former religion in order to do so, which was very difficult. Basically, since that time, I haven't spoken with my family, who are Jehovah's Witnesses. I've seen them numerous times, but not even a simple hi. Sometimes not even, they won't even make eye contact. Maybe the friends that I have, of course, didn't talk anymore. But I can say, subhanAllah, a relationship with my wife that did not suffer, and I'm grateful for that. And it was all worth it, because when loyalty is to the Creator, when loyalty is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the worship of the Creator, it doesn't matter what sacrifice we have to make, because the sacrifice is well worth it. And there's nothing that could be more worth leaving off the things of this world in order to follow, to be loyal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's something that even to this day I don't regret doing. And in turn, I gained a much bigger family amongst all of you brothers and sisters and this entire ummah around the world. And so really this is my experience coming to accept the religion of Islam.